It's not just radio, it's Rockland World Radio. RocklandWorldRadio.com.
Welcome to Dialogues with Dan, heard on Rockland World Radio every Tuesday evening at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Be sure to check out the archives located off the menu bar. Now the host of Dialogues with Dan, Dan Windheim.
Richard, hi everyone. How you all doing? Tonight, I have a great guest from Nyack, but before we start, I'd like to congratulate Mike and Kayla on their wedding that just passed. Congratulations.
Thank you very
Mike
much, Dan.
and Kayla Tangney. Great news. Excellent.
Appreciate that very much.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And I'd like to acknowledge my sponsors, the Poorhouse of Nyack, New York, and the Old Village Inn of Nyack also. Yes. Yes, thank you. They offer great food, drink, and all the above. So, Mike Tangney, I understand you're a phys ed teacher in Orange County. Maybe you could explain how you got into that and what that is.
Yeah, I'm a phys ed teacher in Goshen, New York, a high school phys ed teacher. I also coach soccer, basketball, and lacrosse. And I've wanted to be a phys ed teacher since I was in high school. I went to SUNY Brockport and got my bachelor's degree. I went to Long Island University and got my master's degree. And then I worked in various sports facilities, kind of acting like a phys ed teacher without actually getting paid the appropriate dollars to be one. And I put my time in, and eventually I got a job, and I'm going into my second year of being a phys ed teacher at Goshen this year.
Excellent. So sports is a huge part of your life.
Yes, for sure.
Not just sports, but physical fitness and health and all the above.
Yeah, in general. I'm certainly a sport fan. Let's go Knicks. But sports and fitness is an everyday part of my lifestyle, as well as one that I need to convey to all my athletes.
Sure. Yeah, so could you tell us about the students you work with, their ages, maybe boys, girls, all sizes?
Throughout the years, I've worked with kindergartners, which is age 4 or 5, all the way up to college-level athletes, which is 22, 23. Last year, I was a 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade phys ed teacher, which was essentially a party every single day going into work. We played games. We had fun every single day. And this year going in, I'll call it a promotion. I've been promoted to the high school age phys ed world. A little bit more challenging, but certainly excited to be working around my athletes that I coach after school every day. And I'll be working with 9th through 12th grade boys, which is 14, 15 to 17, 18-year-old boys. Some of them will want to be there, and some of them certainly won't. And my job will be to meet them in the middle and keep everybody happy.
Yes, you said some might not want to be there, but the athletes, the ones that join the teams, they want to be there for sure.
Correct. Part of the things that I bring to the table, and the reason that I think they're bringing me up to the high school this year, is I've started creating a curriculum that would give the athletes the ability to compete against each other on a day-to-day basis, not only after school but during school in phys ed, and then also the kids that don't want to be involved in those competitive sports, they need an outlet too. I'm into yoga. I know that kids are into dance. They're into archery. There's alternative forms of physical fitness that these kids need to be exposed to instead of forcing them into the world of competitive sports. And so I'm looking to create a curriculum to change the way phys ed is looked at, so it's not just come in and play dodgeball, and if you're an athlete, you're going to dominate, and if you're not, you're going to hide in the corner. Let's come up with a way for everybody to enjoy it on a day-to-day basis.
Yes. So I imagine you have to be very creative and really use your resources.
Yeah, I heard this show is lacking sponsorship, so I hate to plug YouTube, but I look at my curriculum book at the beginning of the year, and if there is something that I'm not sure about as to how to make it fun for a 14-year-old kid, I go on YouTube and the resources are just endless. Sure. I dive in. I'm a soccer coach and a lacrosse coach, but those are sports that I did not play at a highly competitive level in high school or college. I played basketball at a highly competitive level. But when I was asked to coach, I certainly wasn't going to go in there unprepared. So I put in my time and I learned the drills and I learned the skills and the strategies, and it really pays off. You see it because the kids respect that you put the time in. That's for sure.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah. Could you share with us some of maybe the exercises and the like physical exercise involved in gym teachers and getting students physically fit?
Yeah, depending on the level. When you're with younger kids, I like to use the phrase that we trick them into being fit. A 7, 8, 9, even up to that 10 years old, if you tell them that we're doing push-ups and sit-ups to get in shape, they're going to look at you like you're crazy. But if you can put together an obstacle course that they can't, quote-unquote, pass the muddy river until they do 10 sit-ups, then most of the time it tricks them into doing what you need them to do. As far as the older kids, it's a different story. You certainly stress the lifelong aspects that fitness provides for the kids that aren't involved in sports after school, and that's tough to motivate those kids. That's for sure. The kids that are involved in those competitive sports, they're easier to motivate, and they're the ones that really dive into this new age of fitness, which gears away from the old school sit-up, push-up mentality. Things like plyometrics and agility training and speed training. And kids these days are really sports specific. They'll pick a sport at like 9 or 10 years old and they'll play it all year round. It's very rare to find a 3-sport athlete these days, which is something that I hope to turn that back around. I think it's a lost art with kids these days. Parents burn them out on one specific sport way too early.
Yes.
Yeah.
And by doing that, being burnt out, I imagine they lose in other areas, maybe school, socially, and in different aspects of life or school life.
Yeah. If you just take a look at the sport, a lot of kids, stud athletes will quit their sport halfway through their high school career, or I've even seen stud athletes turn down scholarships because they don't want the pressure of going to college and playing that sport. And then on the social or educational level, you'll see kids totally neglect their grades and grades slip. And I'm a grades first teacher. I teach student athletes. I don't teach athlete students. So grades got to be up. And then lastly, it's an unfortunate dark side of it, but we're losing kids that there's too much pressure on them, and they decide that they're gonna take it to an extreme, and that's when you really have issues.
Yes, it's hard to believe, but when I went to school and now it's like black and white, you know?
It's a different world.
Yes. Could you maybe share how you provide a safe environment and social growth for students or any student?
Yeah, certainly a huge part of my job.
Yes.
When I'm in phys ed class, it's a safety first atmosphere. Whatever game we're doing, the first thing we do is we go over the safety of the gymnasium, of the activity that we're doing. When I'm training my athletes, especially in areas like the weight room, form and going slow and getting the basic structure of the lifts and things like that down is important, not for them at the moment. It's 20 years down the road, so they don't have a herniated disc in their back, and they're coming back yelling at me as their old phys ed teacher. The social environment is crucial. You know, I have this saying, people ask me, how do you coach soccer? You didn't play soccer. How do you know? And I really believe that it's from the middle school level on, having knowledge of sports-specific knowledge of what you're coaching is important. I label it as 20%. 80% is learning how to manage adolescent kids. Right now, I have a soccer team of 20 13 to 15-year-old girls. When I send them out to do a long run and I look at them as one big blob, that's like a mini city. There's a mayor, there's the troublemakers, there's the gossip girls. It's all real. All the little rumors that you hear about what goes on in high school now, if you can imagine, happens in a bubble of 20 girls. And this is just my soccer example. Yeah. And I need to learn how to take all 20 of those girls and motivate them towards the same exact goal. And while that goal is winning, the goal is getting better as athletes. Winning is an outcome of that a lot of the times.
Yes.
But so socially, I need to provide them with an opportunity to equal out the playing field so the popular girl in school doesn't necessarily start off ahead of the girl that doesn't have as many friends. Level it out and teach them to interact with each other, which is what we eventually have to do in the workforce. You have to learn how to interact with everybody.
That's right. Yes, so I'm wondering, maybe you could give some simple ways that kids, adults, people could stay fit.
Yeah, for sure. In my world, we learn that eating is 70%. It's your diet. There's a term, clean eating, that gets bounced around all the time now, and a lot of people are unaware what that means.
I'm unaware.
Yeah, you know, we like to hang out at, shout out to Poorhouse, we like to hang out at Poorhouse and get the chicken fingers, and great, they taste great, but when you're eating food that's processed, and that means, when it's not just natural food. If you go to an organic store and you buy all that, the natural chicken, the natural milk, the things that don't go through the process of slamming things together to make it taste better, that's when you really allow your body to use food as fuel, and that's the key. Your vegetable and your fruit intake needs to be up every day. Your protein intake needs to be up every day. You can't overdo it with the carbs. Sometimes I freak out a little bit and I go, oh my God, I can't have any carbs. I can't have any carbs. No, that's not the case. You just got to make sure that you're doing exercise to burn it off. And they say calories brought in have to equal calories spent. And that means whatever you're eating for the day, there's a calorie number on that.
Yes.
And lucky for us, technology allows us to track that pretty easily. You can download apps and stuff. For example, I use an app called MyFitnessPal that everything that I eat, I can plug it right into my app, and it'll even track my exercise. If I go for a 2-hour jog, I plug that in, and it tells me how many calories I burned. Mm-hmm. And then at the end of the day, if my calories are too high and I haven't burned enough, maybe I'll go for another half-hour jog. Like if I want to have an extra beer or two at night, which is okay, you just got to make sure that you do the right work to burn those calories off.
Well put.
Oh, thanks.
You walk the talk.
Right, correct. I try to.
So how do things differ? Like years ago, things were looked at very differently as exercise, food, and all the above.
Yeah. I think we've just become more aware of high quality foods in our society. That's why you see all these organic shops opening up and can continue to exist. I think 20 years ago, if you opened up an organic food store, I think people would have been scared of it. They wouldn't know what they're walking into. So I think knowledge has allowed people, their diet to be better, but then also people are finding more efficient ways to exercise. It's not just going into the gym and doing the bench press to see how much you can lift anymore. Nobody cares that you can bench press 300 pounds anymore.
Right.
There's new fads like CrossFit.
Did you just say no one cares?
Nobody cares. Nobody cares if you can bench press 300 pounds.
Oh, boy.
What are you benching these days, Dan?
300.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Just kidding.
CrossFit, Insanity, there's something called Asylum. There's all these like fad programs that really do have, there's some substance to them, but what they use is they use a lot more body weight, and they use high energy movements that you don't need hundreds of pounds to move. To be burning the calories you want. It just needs to be high intensity and efficient training, which is real easy to find out there. You Google things like CrossFit or anything like that, and you can find those exercises very easily.
Yeah, it sounds like physical fitness gym is much more elaborate, creative, much more involved than the dumb jock.
100% agree, and I'll acknowledge the rest of the educational world. While there are still some old-time teachers in place that unfortunately make learning miserable for kids, the new generation of teachers coming up are being equipped with this creative mindset to come up with ways for kids to not only learn, but to hopefully like learning. That's what I'm trying to do in my phys ed classes.
Yeah, could you say that again? That was an important statement.
The best way to put it is old school teacher mentality cracked open a textbook and said, here's how we're going to learn. And as people have studied the way that kids learn, the way that people learn in general, most people don't learn from reading out of a textbook. Most people aren't going to like phys ed class if you go in and you do 100 push-ups, 100 sit-ups, 100 jumping jacks, and then send them on their way. So the new group of teachers, the young blood of teachers that are coming in are really well equipped with the ability to make learning a positive experience, to make phys ed a positive experience for kids. And you see it in a lot of public school systems today. It's not done yet. There's still a lot of that old mentality, and it exists, and it's there. And if you ask any high school kid, 3 out of 5 of their teachers probably are still teaching right out of the textbook. But in the classroom, things like smart boards and the internet and being able to communicate with classrooms across the world, and if you go into a gymnasium now in a high school, you're going to still see some kids doing push-ups and sit-ups, but you're going to see a lot of kids being active, playing games, and enjoying it.
Yes, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, so I guess you just told us how gym classes have changed. Like, no dodgeball.
There's this dodgeball got a really bad rap back in the day that what would happen is that it would single out the weaker athletes in the class. And so people said, we're outlawing dodgeball. And now it's a joke. Now it's turned into this joke that you can't say the dodgeball word in school. But what phys ed, here's a great example. Phys ed teachers got creative. And if you could picture, you're in a gymnasium and there's the basketball court out of bounds lines in any gymnasium, and they would put bowling pins. Say they'd put 4 bowling pins on the baselines, which are the end lines at the basketball court, on each one. They'd break up 2 teams. They'd hand out we'll call them bowling dodgeball. They wouldn't just call it dodgeball.
Yes.
And they'd say the object of this game is to knock the bowling pins down on the other end of the court. But if you accidentally get in the way of the ball that's trying to knock the bowling pin down, then you're out. So teachers have gotten creative, and they've turned a negative that people felt like was pinpointing the smaller, weaker kids in class into a more positive experience. And we do play dodgeball-esque games. Nobody be calling Goshen and say that Coach Tangney's playing dodgeball in his gym, in his phys ed class. That's not happening.
No.
But we have our own version of things, that's for sure.
Yes. And how about no physical contact? Like, as far as I know, they don't like what physical contact. Maybe like in, I just read an article about soccer players, goalies, wearing helmets.
I saw that article. That's an excellent article. And the NFL has certainly shed a ton of light on the effects of concussions. And as a coach, before I coached a sport in Goshen, I needed to be trained in concussion management. This is a great shout out to Goshen. My school district, any JV or varsity player that is going to play a sport in that current school year, before the season starts, needs to sit down and take a test on a computer. Yeah. What the test does is, if you can picture, it is a quick thinking test. So it quickly shows them, say, a group of 5 circles, and 2 of them are colored in. And the question just on the bottom is, how many circles are colored in? Click how many. Then there'll be another question with tally marks. How many tally marks on there? And you got to have a quick answer. And say there's 30 of those questions. They call that a baseline concussion test because it's a quick thinking test. Yeah. If a player suffers a head injury, there's protocol before they can get back, and the first protocol before they can get back on the field is they need to score the same score that they scored on that baseline test. Yes. Because the baseline test really helps to evaluate brain activity and evaluate quick thinking, which is the first thing that a concussion affects.
Don't they do that in the pros also, right?
The same exact test that gets administered in the pros gets administered to my high school kids.
Oh, yeah. And it's been effective.
It's been extremely effective. I've had multiple players suffer concussions, and the same way that you watch, I'll give a shout out to Geno Smith on my Jets, get a concussion and want to run back in the game, and the coaches say no because there's protocol now. My high school athletes are the same way. I got a 15-year-old boy ready to go to war for me on the basketball court. He gets hit in the head. He just thinks he's got a headache, and he wants to jump back in there. And me as the responsible coach, I need to say, listen, there's a protocol. You're going to sit out this game. We're going to reevaluate, go through the steps, and then we can go back to playing.
As a coach, you want to win. Do you ever, maybe we should discuss this off camera?
No, I can answer that the same way that I coach student athletes and grades are important. Yes. My athletes are just so valuable to me as kids, not as my athletes. They're valuable to me as my kids, and
that's a great answer.
And I would never put them in jeopardy like that.
Yes, and going back, I wanted to ask about mouth guards. Mm-hmm. Like, I know, really all sports, you wear mouth guards. Soccer, basketball, everything.
Yeah, on my soccer and my basketball teams, it is optional. Oh. You do not have to wear a mouth guard. On my lacrosse team, the girls are required to wear a mouth guard.
Yes.
It is judged. It is that rule is just put in place by the governing body that kind of controls the rules of each individual sport. They even say that mouth guards can help with concussions because of the pressure that you put down on the mouth guard when you get hit in the head.
Yes.
They say that that can divert some of the brain injury that happens when you have a concussion. But yeah, right now it's optional. Helmets are, the soccer helmet, that article was a great article about the coach making his goalies wear it because the goalie is in a position to suffer a head injury all the time.
Yes.
But yes, still a lot of equipment is optional, and I don't know where my opinion is on mouth guards just yet.
Yes, how do you avoid like negative actions in gym class, on the field? Do you make people, well, not do push-ups or run laps?
Right. I'm gonna surprise you here, Dan.
No.
Because you know me to be a extremely nice guy, right? That's how you've seen me in public.
So far, that's it.
Okay. So I am that same very nice guy in my phys ed classes. My discipline in phys ed goes more along the lines, not physical discipline. I'll, if somebody keeps coming late to my class, I'll ask them to write me a report on something, or else their grade is going to suffer. Yes. And I can use grades as a discipline in phys ed, where I don't have the ability to do that on my sports teams. Discipline on my sports teams is a lot different. And I am granted permission as a head coach of a sports team to use my judgment as to what I think is appropriate discipline. For example, on my basketball team, I have 15 boys that, like I said before, are ready to go to war for me. And if one of my soldiers gets out of line in practice, I send him to the races running. And it's no more, I'm not saying go do 10 laps. I'm not saying go do 10 push-ups. I say go run, and I'll tell you when to stop. And it's a different world when you're coaching high-level sports because the kids respect it. The kids know when they mess up. And when I give them a punishment, they know that they earn this punishment. And I don't give outlandish punishments. When I say go run, don't stop, it's not days of running. But it's to do two things. One, I'm conditioning my athlete.
Yes.
And two, it's reminding them who's boss. On a sports team, it's not a democracy. That's for sure.
Right. Yeah, you had spoken about some websites that you had looked up. Could you share them?
Yeah. As an elementary school teacher, there's a website called phys-ed-games.com. Whether you're a new parent or a phys ed teacher, check out that website. It gives you, with minimal equipment, gives you creative ideas on how to get kids moving. It's extremely important. I know YouTube is such a broad website to use as a reference, but I do want to say to the millions and millions of people listening to our show right now that I am involved in youth sports on an everyday level because the second and third and fourth graders right now will be my 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th graders in the future.
Exactly.
And the only way that those kids can get the attention that they need is parental volunteers. And parent volunteers are petrified to step into a world that they don't know about. When they don't know about basketball and their kid wants to go play basketball, they hope that another mom or dad steps up and does the job.
Yes.
I am telling these parents, go to YouTube, look up youth basketball skills, youth soccer skills. It's all laid out for you, and you can do it all on your own. You don't need to wait. You don't need to pay somebody to do it, because I was the person they paid to do it for a long time, and it's how I lived.
Yes.
And it's because parents are petrified to try to help, to try to step into a world that they're unfamiliar with. I'd encourage them all to try to do that.
And with all your friends listening, I think we might make 1 million. Right? All your friends.
Hey, all of my friends are listening. Yes. Shout out to Viper. Shout out to Matt Monahan. Kayla, I love you. Mom, Dad, Josh, Carly, Dan. Love you guys. Thank you for listening.
Yes. Yeah, in our last few minutes, I'd like you to comment on a few things.
Sure.
Maybe you could speak about some role models.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned a few. Geno Smith. And any others?
I unfortunately, and I don't mean to knock pro athletes, but there are just so few pro athletes that can serve the role as a role model in kids' lives these days. Look up to your teachers. Look up to parents that are doing the right thing. And if it's not your parents, go and pursue somebody in your educational system, because I understand that not everybody in the educational system is a good role model, but in any building that you're in right now getting your education, there's somebody there that's out to better the lives of the youth out there.
Yes.
And they're the people you should go find.
Yes, thanks. And how about steroids? I'm sure you've dealt with that. As far as your athletes, maybe, coach, do you think I should try some steroids? What do you think?
It's an epidemic in the high schools across the country. I have a good friend who Dan, you know very well, and I'm not going to say his name because I'm sure he'd like to keep it confidential, but as a junior in high school, his baseball coach told him that he should do a cycle of steroids and thought that would better his career. Really? There are people out there that are pitching that to kids, and it's gross. It's disgusting.
Yes.
And it ruins kids' lives, and I've seen it firsthand ruin the lives of kids and families and teams. And there's no place for it in sports as a whole.
Yes, good answer. Our last minute, this show, Dialogues with Dan, started about disabilities and disability topics, issues, and I'm wondering, have you worked with any individuals who might have been disabled, or how would you approach a student who might have an injury or, quote, disability?
Yes, for sure. I work with kids that are on the spectrum every day of my life. I work with adults and young kids that have physical and mental disabilities, and initially it's a little bit nerve-wracking. It's intimidating. It's something that similar to parents not knowing how to tackle an unfamiliar sport. It's an unfamiliar area for a lot of people. But there is so much literature out there and so many resources out there to give you what you need to be able to help these people that need your help. Certainly people in a wheelchair, they just train and work differently than people outside of that aren't in a wheelchair. Yes. Kids on the spectrum, there's ways to get in touch with them, and you can't be scared to try to break through that. You need to go out there, educate yourself so you can be a better instructor.
That's an excellent answer.
Thanks.
Yes, so I'd like to thank you, Mike Tangney, for joining me on Dialogues with Dan. It was a lot of great information.
Let's do it again sometime, man. That was fun.
Excellent.
That was fun.
Thanks a lot. Well, everyone, thanks for joining us. Dialogues with Dan. This has been Mike Tangney. Have a great week. Peace.
It's not just radio, it's Rockland World Radio. RocklandWorldRadio.com.